Hi, good evening, and welcome to Be Read with Mary Alice Monroe and Kate Quinn, brought to you by Carroll County Public Library and A Likely Story Bookstore. I am Debbie Scheller from A Likely Story. Please be sure to type any questions you may have for the authors in the chat window. We will get to as many as possible at the end of the program. Also, we have a special gift from Mary Alice for anyone here tonight who purchases The Summer of Lost and Found from A Likely Story. Be sure to order at www.sykesvillebooks.com, and Mary Alice will personally send you a special gift. You can also call or come into the store for your copy, and we will be sure you get your gift. All books have a signed book plate from Mary Alice as well. Mary Alice Monroe is the New York Times bestselling author of 27 books, including her newest, The Summer of Lost and Found. More than 7.5 million copies of her books have been published worldwide, and she's earned numerous accolades and awards, including induction into the South Carolina Academy of Authors Hall of Fame, South Carolina Award for Literacy Excellence, Romantic Times Lifetime Achievement Award, the International Book Award for Green Fiction, and the prestigious Southern Book Prize for Fiction. Her best-selling novel, The Beach House, is a Hallmark Hall of Fame movie. She is a contributor to the Reunion Beach, the anthology that was just released by several best-selling authors and writers as a tribute to the life and legacy of their friend, New York Times bestselling author Frank. June 15th marks the release of Mary Alice's first middle grade book, The Islanders. I've gotten a sneak peek and highly recommend it. It will be on our shelves and at our book fairs as well. Mary Alice is the co-creator and co-host of the weekly web show and podcast Friends in Fiction, featuring the 5 wonderful best-selling authors, Mary Alice, of course, Mary Kate Andrews, Christy Woodson Harvey, Kristen Hermel, and Patty Callahan Henry. Endless stories, special guests, and a way to connect readers and writers was their goal during the pandemic, and it has worked wonderfully. If you haven't checked them out yet, please join on Wednesdays at 7 p.m. It's a fun and always a lively discussion with a wonderful guest authors, and our special conversation partner tonight, Kate Quinn, was one of the guest authors just recently on Friends in Fiction. Kate is a New York Times and USA Today bestselling author of historical fiction. A native of Southern California, she attended Boston University, where she earned a bachelor's and master's degree in classical voice. She has written 4 novels in the Empress of Rome saga and 2 books in the Italian Renaissance, before turning to the 20th century with the Alice Network, The Huntress, and her newest release, The Rose Code. All have been translated into multiple languages. They're bestsellers here in our store as well. Kate and her husband now live in San Diego with 3 rescue dogs. However, we here in Maryland love to call Kate one of our own hometown authors. Welcome, Mary Alice and Kate. Thank you so much for being here tonight.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much for having us. This is such a treat.
It is.
We are so excited to have you. We're so excited to hear this conversation and learn all about your wonderful new novel. So I'll go in hiding and let you 2 take it away.
Thank you. Well, I have to say, Kate, it's a really treat for me because when you came to Charleston to join me, I interviewed you. And so now you get to interview me too. So it's kind of like a chance for us to see each other again, and it's a treat.
Oh, it really is. And just for everybody, just to fill you guys in who are watching, Mary Alice does this wonderful event, book event every January. And I happened to do that last year. It was the last time that I traveled before the world went into lockdown. So like the last time Mary Alice and I, sat down to do this sort of Q&A talk about books, I mean, I looked like a professional. Like I was wearing pants with an actual waistband in them. It's like I had shoes with heels that I knew how to walk in and, without wobbling like a baby giraffe. So that was quite a while ago. It feels like a different world.
Feels forever, doesn't it? Really? Doesn't it? It was you and Signe Pike, and we were just talking Elizabeth Berg.
Yes.
And that was a fun event, one of the best. And I have to say, everybody, if you've never gone to an event with Kate Quinn just talking, she's a font of knowledge, but she's just keeps it going. She's just so great. And just like her books, a lot of information and she keeps it going. So I'm so glad we had that chance before COVID closed everything down.
Oh yeah, really. That is a nice thing. And hopefully the next one will be in person, but at least we get to catch up now. And let me congratulate you on this release in the middle of, as lockdown is coming to an end. So let's talk about the new book because I can't wait. I loved it.
Oh, so, thank you. Thank you.
Over a year after the start of the pandemic, quarantining, social distancing, you actually jumped into that thing that I think a lot of us were wondering about, those of us who love books, which is, I wonder if there will be now a rash of books about quarantine. You actually felt the need to write a book during this difficult and yet anything but dull year. So how did that go? And let's hear a little bit more about that.
Yeah, it was a big decision. It was a frightening decision because it maybe more brave is the word than frightening, because I usually have a structure where I do a lot of research on a species, and then I, go out and do academic and interviews and hands-on research. That's my usual method. But the world shut down. I had just come back from South America, actually. And I actually think I got COVID. I'll never know for sure because there were no tests, I don't know how many of us were sick in January, February, March. But I'm every symptom, every symptom.
My husband got pneumonia during that time. And since he's in the Navy, all of his friends proceeded to call him patient zero.
Exactly. I came in from South America through the customs and all that, and everyone was, a couple of people were really hacking, coughing, and that's what should have been my first clue. So when I went to the doctor, they said, Mary Alice, you don't have the flu because we did every test in the world, but you have a virus. So at any rate, I wasn't terribly sick at the time. I had 5 rough days. After I healed, I went up to the mountains where I have a house in North Carolina. And I was there with my niece who was taking care of the house for me while I was gone. And the shelter-in-place order came down. So this was about April 8th. And, I realize in retrospect that all of us are going to look back at this 2020, this moment, and say, where were you? Where were you? Where were you when JFK was shot? Where were you when the Twin Towers fell? Where were you in 2020? Where did you shelter? And I think that hit me, that this historical significance of this moment was profound. It was global. So I knew I wasn't going to get on a plane and do any research anywhere. But then I thought, this is a really interesting time in history. And I write family stories. I write about interpersonal relationships. So I said, I'm going to do what I do with wildlife. When you go out into the wild, you keep your ears open and your eyes wide and your mouth shut, and you observe and you take notes. And I did the same thing with the human species in 2020. So in my personal life, I had my 4 sisters living with us, which is a cute story to bring up later, in the mountains. And then my children were in my beach house, and we didn't see each other because they were not as circumspect as I was about being careful with the virus. They were younger, and I witnessed different generations dealing with not the pandemic, but the challenges forced upon us as we had close connections. We formed pods of friends. We had I'm sure many of my listeners right now had family members, young people moved back home. We had people who lost jobs. It was a true shutdown with fear, anxiety, frustrations, and delays. And writing the book, I made the decision, and I thought it was a cool thing to do. This is what I do. I wanted to research the family, and I decided I would use the Rutledge family from the beach house. Because, Kate, I've written this family for 20 years. This is number 7 of the Beach House series, but it stands alone. And I decided, why not use this family that I know so well, 3 generations, and write this book about how they were affected in the year 2020. I thought it would be interesting. Kate, you're a researcher. You're a plotter, right?
Pretty much, yeah.
Pretty much, yeah. So am I. That means, and for those of you who don't know, we talk about this on Friends in Fiction. Are you a plotter or a pantser? A plotter is someone who plots their novels, which Kate and I do. And a pantser is writes by the seat of the pants. They get in there and they start writing. So I am a plotter. But for this book, I was a pantser. Every day was different. It was the hardest book I ever wrote, Kate.
So you really, it's very different from your usual process of writing because you wrote this book in real time.
In real time. And, at the time, when I was going through it, I wasn't as cognizant that this was going to change. First, I thought, by June, it would be all over.
Oh, my summer child.
It's just going to last till June, right? So what I thought my story was going to be in April changed in June, deepened in August, and by December I had rewritten. That outline was in the garbage. Ain't no good because we were living through this together as a country, as a planet, and not just interpersonal with my own family. And it was truly a challenge to try and watch all this and decide what it was that I was going to say about the lessons I've learned through this. Because the title Lost and Found, which was Kristen Harmel, she came up with the title from Friends in Fiction. Kristen we all brainstormed, and perfect title, because we did lose a lot in 2020, this year like no other. But we also found a lot. And I realized that it was a hard-won recognition. It was a tough year. I'm not going to make any bones about it. But it was also a year that I did a lot of self-exploration. I think a lot of us did. We created new memories. There's funny things happened. And in this book, I think it's my funniest book. I really tell people that. And they think it's hard to believe, but it's funny. And we can go into Julia, the mother, for example. But in the end, by December, when I finished, and everyone was, what it's like, the publishing houses. Where's that book? Because I'm under contract to finish. I don't have 10 years to write a book. I had to trust my instincts, like I always do. And I was hard won, but I knew what I had to say. And I think I did it. And it's an inspiring book. It was meant to be inspiring.
It was. And I think anybody, and I saw a question in the side there, you absolutely can jump into this book and read it without necessarily having read every single one of the Beach House series before this. Although I encourage you to, obviously buy all the rest of the Beach House books too.
True, but that's how I designed it.
The Beach House series, it's been such a long running and beloved series now for, as you said, 20 years. How have the characters changed and, developed in that time?
Well, that's it exactly. When I wrote the first book, The Beach House, which many other people have taken that title, and I just don't understand. It's a popular book. Find another title. It's like, come on. 3 other authors have used it. I'm like, oh, dear Lord. But anyway, when I wrote The Beach House 20 years ago, it was Carroll, the heroine, was 40 years old. And she comes home to this tiny little beach house on Isle of Palms, where I live. It's my home. And it's a reconciliation with her mother. But I'm also setting a backdrop of sea turtles. And because I am a turtle team volunteer, or a turtle lady is the affectionate term. It's an old-timey term. But she was 40. And to answer your question, over the next 20 years, well, I only wrote one book, and I thought that was it. There was never intended to be a series. And then when I had something else to say, my girlfriend called and said, "Hey, Mary Alice, we're starting a turtle hospital here at the aquarium. Come on down," because I was on the team. So I was there, and I was one of the people who actually helped build the first sea turtle hospital, which was really kiddie pools, duct tape, and cardboard boxes at the basement of the aquarium. But we saved a lot of turtles down there. And now we have a state-of-the-art sea turtle hospital at the South Carolina Aquarium. But back then, it was wild. And so I wrote about the resilience. I always look for, what is it about that I'm learning from the animals that is a parallel to humans? So in this one was the resilience of women. So over the years, whenever I had something to say about shorebirds or pelicans, water birds, whatever, I would bring them into this series because much to my delight and surprise, readers engaged with the characters. Sort of like the Mitford series. They really want more. They love these characters. And it's my honor, and I won't disappoint. I'm not going to be the author who says, no, I'm done, I won't do anymore. As long as my readers say, please, what's the next book? I'll make sure I get that done, as long as I'm alive. And so Kara now in the summer of Lost and Found is almost 60. So I grew up with the girl. I know her so well. And her mother, Lovey, is the first generation. And she passed the beach house down to Kara, who's now renting the beach house to her niece, Linnea, who's just 25. Linnea was 8 years old in the first book. And so she's now a young woman. And it's nice to see the generations pass and the issues change. And I've grown up right along with them, Kate. It's been great.
This book really does introduce the next generation, which is interesting. And it's about how it's the passing of this beach house legacy to that generation. So what do you think what is that legacy, and why does that continue to be important as the people, who live in that house change?
I'm so glad you asked that question. You're such a good reader. Thank you. I'm someone who does research like this, obviously is going to ask good questions. That's one of the things that was hard won. What is this book really about? I'm sure you feel the same with all your historicals. You've got all this information. You write your first draft, and don't you sort of figure it takes a draft to really know what the heart of the book is?
Yeah, I always feel like I figure it out. Like the themes come up at me. It's kind of like a fish coming up toward the surface of the water, and you're like, oh, there it is. And then usually you figure out like your subconscious has been tap dancing all over the manuscript. So what the book is about is not just about, I don't know, code breakers in England or, saving turtles on the Isle of Palms. It also is about something that maybe you personally are worried about and are doing a lot of thinking.
Well said. That's exactly it. What is that you want to say? Yeah. And I feel that in your books, there's an underlying message that you share with us. And for me, usually I kind of know what it is by the time I've spent years with the species. And because it takes me years of research before I actually write the book. And with this one, of course, I'm in real time again. So it was a little bit more heartfelt, because not only did my characters learn it, I learned it. And with this new generation, as you said, I knew that I was introducing these young kids to my readers. But also it gave me an opportunity to see and explore how their lives had truly changed, and their lives stopped. A lot of them couldn't date. They lost their jobs. They're back home with mom and dad or their aunt, like in my case. And we on the other spectrum, the older generation, we're kind of watching the young, but we're scared for our health. Like right now I'm saying I'm vaccinated, I'm free, I'm not going to die, which is what we were a little concerned about. But I do have an older generation, even still in the 80s, who has Alzheimer's and people protected. And I learned through all that we really watched out for each other. And I think that's one of the things that was best lesson thing that I witnessed, is maybe better to say, about these people. We were in a war. You write about war, Kate. And when you're in that war mentality, the human spirit shines, and you have heroes. You have really great moments. And I think emotions are intensified. Don't you think, when you write about war?
Absolutely. And it's the idea of any kind of crisis does a certain amount to basically show people, okay, what are you made of? And something which is similar, I wrote in my last book about, it was more of a home front book than some of the others. It wasn't in the middle of a war zone. And it's something that is somewhat similar again with a lockdown, as you have been the crisis in yours. But it's a feat of endurance. It's not about, one hard push to get through one attack, one battle,
Right.
one thing. It is endurance. It's having to do the same thing every day, and to have to just, the British in their keep calm and carry on. And I think the keep calm and carry on mentality actually was very helpful during the pandemic as well.
It was. And I also think that you find, who you can trust in wartime, in any kind of wartime. And this was, like I said, a time like no other. And we formed our pods, our family units, and we trusted them to not go out. So like I said, I don't want to make it sound like the whole book was about fear and the pandemic, but it was a setting that I put these relationships in for this summer. And there's Kara at 40, 60 now, and Emmy at 80, and her best friend, and Flo. And then we have little Linnea and Cooper and Annabelle. And what Annabelle and Cooper do is move into the beach house because they can't afford to pay rent, or they don't want to live with mom and dad. I mean, this is young kids coming together in this beach house. Then, interestingly, Linnea had fallen in love years before with a boy who she went to California with. Oh my gosh, family was in Charleston. You don't want to see your baby girl go all the way to the other coast, to that wild place called California, where you live, Kate. we like to keep our girls home by the Atlantic, not the Pacific. So she's back home after he broke her heart. But by coincidence, he's visiting his mother, who lives next door, Emmy. It's incestuous. We all know each other, these small southern towns. And he gets quarantined, so he's there. Meanwhile, Gordon, who's a Brit, a marine biologist, the perfect guy she falls in love with, the previous book, is in England, and he is desperately trying to come home. So a funny story. Can I tell you a funny story?
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
It's the next generation. And I'm trying to be cool. These are 20s and 30s. I know these kids. I'm pretty cool, right? So I tell my daughters who's in her 30s, and I said, well, you read the dialogue, and I have a problem. Gordon wants to come and move to the beach house with Linnea. But, they're not married, so he can't do that. And my daughter's like, Mama, first of all, they've been together in the last book. So they're already a couple. But he's coming all the way from England, and you don't think he's going to want to stay with her? She's not going to say, of course she'd say yes. And I'm like, oh, no, my readers will never settle for that. Not in my beach house. Oh, no. And
do not besmirch these walls.
Do not.
Charles.
This is Charleston, South abroad. You don't do that. So she laughed and didn't laugh, and she convinced me and really made me understand that if I'm going to be true to this millennial generation, I had to open up. And of course I did, because I'm an author. It's not my opinion. I'm observing and telling the truth. So there's this little beach house with all these young people in it. But the funny part was I got my just desserts. I had her mother, Julia, accidentally come in and all my shock and horror about what's going on in that beach house is expressed through Julia, the mother.
I immediately thought of that scene as soon as you started telling the story. I was like, that's where that came from.
Oh, yes. It's like, all right, I'm writing it down, but oh, no. What's happening in my beach house? So it's funny. It's funny, too.
That was really funny.
I had to do that. I have girls, and I think the lesson that I learned was what Kara said to Julia, the mother. Hey, they're grown-ups. Our job is to advise and to support and to let them find their way. And that is the wise words of the old crone that I'm becoming.
But let's talk a little bit more about some of these, rich friendships and relationships in this book. I mean, Kara and Linnea, despite the fact that there's, quite a generational gap between them, they have such a strong friendship. And it really seems they're closer and more deeply connected in so many ways than Linnea with her mother. So how's that process there? Why make that particular connection between the characters?
Oh, I think that's a beautiful relationship. that sometimes we love our mothers like no one else, but it's not always necessarily the person, at least at this age in your 20s, that you can confide in. Because mothers have so many plans for their children, who they're going to marry, especially in South of Broad Charleston. Who are you going to marry? Where are you going to settle down? Because mothers want the best for their kids, and that's what they think is best for their children. It's traditional. We want to see our children safe. While a mentor, whether it's an aunt or a good friend or a teacher, sometimes can be the person that you can confide in. There's a scene in the book that I really love.
Oh, good, because I was going to ask you, what is your favorite scene in this?
This is my favorite scene. And it is between Kara, the aunt, and Linnea. And early, first chapter, I should just tell you, Linnea gets furloughed from the aquarium, a job she loves, and she is renting the house from Kara. And that's when Kara tells her, don't worry about rent. That's what this house is all about. It's the legacy of the beach house to help women. We lend our hand. And that is the legacy that Linnea took to heart when she opened up her house to all her friends who needed a place to stay, the brothel, as Julia calls it. But her heart was like, I want to give. I want to take this legacy seriously. So throughout the book, it's her motivation, which is also her crutch and her problem, because she's giving, even cleaning the house. You live with someone who's not the neatest girl, like Anna, and it's like, can't you just wash the dishes? It's like, don't leave them in the sink. We've all been there with someone in our families, right? Just the little things tend to get you down more than the big issues. It's the little ones. So she's at the end torn between this triangle of these two men, and she's lost, I think, the important focus of self-discovery and what is it that's right for her. And that's when she's floundering. And there's a scene on the beach where it's a turtle nest. And you're on the beach, Kate. And there's something, I sit at the nest a lot at night. And they always emerge late, early morning. And when you're sitting outdoors, whether it's a forest or the beach, and it's getting to be midnight, there's something different in the air. The air chills, and it gets a deeper quiet. And on many nights, it's so black, dark. You don't see the ocean, but you can hear the wave, that constant rush. And there's something ghostly and intimate about that time. And these two women, mentor, aunt and niece, are sitting together waiting for the sand to move with turtles. And this is a confession when Linnea says, I'm exhausted. I don't know what to do. And she's lost. And Kara, her mentor, says, I know I told you about the legacy, but women tend to be givers. And I think all of us can relate to that. And if you read a lot of articles about this year in the pandemic, even though everyone was home, there was always the mother doing the dishes and the cooking. It just seemed to fall to women. And she said, basically, in different words, we have to take care of ourselves. That is not selfish. That self in the word selfish is important. And that gives Linnea then the courage and the understanding to make the decision moving forward, the climax of the book, where it's about herself. And I think that's really critical. So that's my favorite scene, because it's one of the important lessons of this whole novel, that is to find who you are and what choices you want to make as we move out of this pandemic to this new normal. We get to choose how we reimagine our future. And that is the legacy we leave. I think at this point in my career, I've had 35 years of being an author. It's a long time. And I'm pretty secure in my legacy. For 20 years, I've created this body of work where I've set my books against some species to bring awareness through the power of story. Not nonfiction, but story. And if I died tomorrow, and I don't want to, but I learned over this last year of self-discovery that I have that legacy left behind. But the legacy I'm going to leave with my friends, my children, my grandchildren. This is something personal that all of us on this planet get to choose to live for the moment, to enjoy today, and decide what choices am I going to make to leave a legacy for my family that I can be proud of. So what that means for me personally is I may not be turning on the computer and working when my grandchildren visit. Oh, mom was always working. I'm always working. You know, mom was on book tour. Mom was researching whales. Mom was writing a book. But I'm not playing with them. Now I'm going to play with them a little more and have time for my children. And if they say, Mom, will you come visit the museum with me? My answer is going to be yes, because I choose to move forward. That is the lesson of the pandemic. We get to choose how we want to reimagine our lives in this new.
Oh, that's wonderful. And I think that really resonates because, and I'll say this without spoilers for anyone who has not read this book yet, but the thing I loved about Linnea's final choice in this book and really her ending is that because you wrote this in real time, Linnea does not know because you didn't know where the world was going. And so there can't be, and there is not some sort of finishing scene where it's like the world is reopened, the virus is conquered, everything is back to normal. You didn't write that because that wasn't what the world looked like, and you were writing that you didn't know. And so she doesn't know either. So the only thing she can do is make a choice for now, to choose for now what is best now, rather than try to think 8 steps ahead the way way we try to do so often. It's like, well, I can't think about now. I also need to be thinking about, is this the right choice for next year and 5 years down the line and my life plan and all of that. And sometimes that is, in fact, more often than we like to think, that is not possible.
But isn't that true for all of us? Because, we're always thinking down the line, looking at the calendar, what's coming up, rush, 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 rush. And I think if anything else, with all the time that we had in our backyards, talking to loved ones, not working, a lot of us were able to stay home. We got to slow down and get off that hamster wheel. I don't want to get back on. That's the lesson. That's what I found. Is Eckhart Tolle, for years I've read him, and he always talks about living in the present. I didn't get it, Kate, until after this experience. What that really meant is this, like you said, now, here and now. I'm here with you, Kate, right now, and I don't care, where dinner is and what's coming tomorrow. Right now, I'm having the best time talking to you.
Yes, me too. And, I'm thinking also, as far as someone living in the moment in this book, is that you mentioned her earlier, there's the older character of Flo, Florence Prescott. And she's someone that, appears in the very first Beach House book. And you watch her aging process as she moves into Alzheimer's, which has progressed throughout the series. And I'm not going to spoil anything about what happens to her, but, she is someone who can only live inside her mind as it decays, and she can only live in the moment that she's in without a lot of frames of reference. And so, not spoiling the story, but do you want to say anything more about, the evolution of a character like this in the series who is, really such a favorite?
Well, it is one of the great joys of writing a series as long lasting as this one is to be able to see characters age and change. I know in the book before this, on Ocean Boulevard, I really let Flo's Alzheimer's pronounce. She's been slipping over the years. And this is not spoiler, but she was always a fiery turtle lady, best friend of Lovey in the first book, and never married. She was a social worker, proud woman. Over the years, when Emmy got older and Emmy divorced, Emmy and the friend, she bought the house next door. So you see the two women helping each other, and then the Alzheimer's slowly began. And it's getting to know people and really caring about them over the course of many years. And in this last book, I was witnessing what was going on in my own life, Kate. And so I was saying I had this house in the mountains, and I invited my niece and my 2 sisters to share the house with me to get them out of the city. One from LA, California, one from Chicago, and my niece who was with me when I opened up the house. And I could watch them. And my niece was out of a job and redirected her interests and went back to school. And, my sisters were very afraid, older, of the virus. And so that fear factor, that, a little bit of being really careful. But my mother-in-law in Florida was ill and on what we call the withers. And, you just start withering away. And we knew this was coming to an end. We could not visit her. And that was not uncommon for a lot of people during this last year. And that was the inspiration for Flo, that wanting to protect her and care for her, because if you put her into the hospital or you put someone into a home, they close those doors and you can't get in. And and I did lose a brother, and he was in a home, and Kate, it's when I saw you in California that I was going to go visit my brother. We went to the Queen Mary. Do you remember that? It was a great trip.
It was a great event. That was February 1st, 2020.
That was my last event.
It was my last event too.
Yeah. And it was celebrating Super Book Sunday.
Superbook weekend, Superbook Sunday.
And we were on the Queen Mary. Wasn't that the coolest? I mean, guys, if you ever want to visit the Queen Mary, it's for real. And my brother lives in Paso Robles. So I rented a car. My sister, I don't know if you met my sister, we were all set to go visit my brother in Paso Robles. And that morning, a fog came down like God saying, "You're not going anywhere." You couldn't see your hand in front of you. So I couldn't go. And I said, well, you know what? I'm sorry. And I knew he was slipping. And because he had Lewy body, which was degenerative.
Oh, that's terrible.
And so I said, I'll see you in March. I'm flying back out in March. I didn't. So I never got to see him. And he caught COVID. It went in the home and he died. So I am aware of loss in the pandemic. And yet, even still, I look forward to the future because, we outran it. We're vaccinated. We are grateful for today. And that's how I think how we all have to look at this. How grateful are we to have this life, this precious life? And I'm going to spend it like my characters did, enjoying each other, having fun, going out in the backyard, Jeremiah, the bullfrog sessions, and just enjoying every day with the people I love. And that is the message. And that I hope is inspiring for everybody.
Well, I certainly found it so. And we're going to be going to questions relatively soon, but I think there is one other one I wanted to ask is that you had a love triangle for this book, Linnea and the two men. There's the ex-boyfriend who broke her heart,
Gordon and John, yeah,
and then there's the lovely Brit who has recently become her boyfriend, and the pandemic complicates their lives. But talk about the love triangle a bit, and there's a very fun thing in here too, where it was John, who is the boyfriend who's in quarantine for a few weeks in the house next door, develops this very romantic habit of floating paper airplanes.
Oh, yeah, I'm so glad
out of his window down to hers, and you see these little drawings of paper airplanes in the book at the start of the chapter, which I thought was great. But I was like, that was a slick move. It's like, John, you can make like a jerk in that first chapter, but just the airplane move. That was great. Me over.
I know. I wish I brought it in one more time at the end. If there's a sequel, I will. But John, I did not know if it would be John or Gordon when I started this book. And usually I know the end. I didn't know.
Really?
No, and that surprised me. And a lot of my readers who know the story, which were friends of mine who I was debating. They wanted Gordon. They wanted Gordon or they wanted John. They knew who they wanted. And it wasn't until I worked it through. And the paper airplane, I mean, that was, how do you communicate to someone in quarantine? And I didn't want it to be foreign. So she looks up and he's in the carriage house. and he just goes one of these and he shoots an airplane down. And it just, I thought it was great. It's that, for me, the airplane was a symbol of serendipity. Do you remember in Forrest Gump with the little feathers floating at the beginning and it returns at the end? And in Bridgerton, it was the little bee buzzing around, and at the end you saw the bee. I love that little tag, that symbol of what are you, the love or whimsy, and that's what it was for me. It was serendipity, that we are not ever going to be able to know or plan our lives fully. So just shoot the airplane out and see where it goes in the wind. But it was a vehicle for a love story. And this triangle, I think, was a major part of the book. It really took a lot of thought and time and everyone aware of what's going on. It was funny and it was sad. But when I finished it, I knew she chose the only way she could have, the choice she made. And it's not conclusive. It's not conclusive, but I think I want the reader to feel, oh yeah, okay, I get it. She made the right choice. Did you feel that?
I did. And, again, it went into that whole thing, how much I liked her ending, which was she is aware that, everything may be changed by tomorrow or next week or next month. They are all living very much from day to day, but this is the only choice she can make now. And that feels right. And, I was aware it's like, maybe in a year she will decide this isn't going to work out after all, and she might go back to the other person, or maybe this couple will stay together. I'm being very careful about not spoiling.
I thank you. But isn't that, I mean, my gosh, she's 25, Kate.
Yeah, she's also 25. It's like,
baby.
This is the right decision for now, and not necessarily needing to, have this be the right decision forever after. So
there are no wedding bells at the end of this book.
No, it's just all right. We're with each other now. Let's enjoy that since it's day by day.
Exactly.
All right. So are we opened up now?
Open up. Hi, that was great. Thank you both so much. We do have several questions here for you, actually for you both. But one of the first ones is Andrea would like to know, Mary Alice, you said the book stands alone. She purchased the entire Beach House series as a retirement gift to herself, and she wants to know if she can read them out of order. Does she read one first? What do you suggest?
Well, first of all, you're getting a straw. This is a really cute collapsible straw. You have to go look at the picture. I'm a pro on non-plastic straws, and this is my favorite. If you bought all of them, I always say start with the Beach House. It's the bedrock of the whole series, and you'll follow it through. If you only bought The Summer of Lost and Found, I wrote this book as a standalone. I do with every single one. That is a beginning and a middle and end. It's my job. It's my craft to just give you enough of the backdrop of all the characters so you come in cold and you're there, just like you would any other novel. If you love the series or you love my voice as a storyteller, then I say, go back to the Beach House and start it, because it does grow. So if you bought all of them, start with the Beach House and just have fun working your way through.
Great. A lot of conversation for both of you, praising both of your books. There are a lot of love out there for both of you. Judy Lockett says it was interesting that she found that Lost and Found appeared a couple of times in the Beach House, and now is the title of this newest one. Was that purposeful?
Is it?
I don't know.
I mean, in an earlier book?
Yeah.
That's
you didn't even know it, did you?
That's what Kate was saying about the subconscious at work.
Yeah.
No, Mary Alice, this is where you get the chance to say, yes, I absolutely planned that. I am a mastermind, and I have all of this stuff planned out years in advance, and it just all
20 years ago. I knew 20 years ago that was the title of this book.
Well, and it was funny because when I read that question, I'm like, oh, I'll have to go back and look now.
I'm amazed. First of all, right? Judy, well done that you caught that. That's what you call a really sharp reader. Thanks. Yeah, that's pretty cool.
This is from Karen, and she's asking, the places you write about are real places. What about the people? Do you base them on real people all the time? Some of the time, never?
This is a question I think both Kate and I can answer.
Yes.
In my stories, I'm very careful that I don't put a real person in there because a character has a job to do, and they have to have a lot of faults as well as great characteristics. But basically, they have to have the wherewithal to get the plot carried through. So I'm inspired. I usually use people and their strengths and weaknesses in comprising a character. I want, especially those who work with the wildlife, I often am inspired, but it's an amalgam. Never, unless someone pays for the option of being in my book. I do sometimes do a charity. You can be a character in a Mary Alice Monroe novel. And every once in a while when that happens, if you noticed a real name and it's a secondary character who's only the nicest person in the world, I'll put them in. Otherwise, Kate, it's probably true you don't use, except of course, historical figures in your case.
Even so, I tend to do, I'll either base my characters very heavily on a historic figure, but I'll fictionalize a certain number of things about them, or my characters will be fictionalized amalgams of real people,
Exactly.
part of this, and I put them together. Although I do this, I do have a game that I play, which is, which sometimes does result in a fun character coming out of nowhere. This is a great one to play, like if you're really bored at a Zoom meeting, or if you're really bored at, like a family function, and you look around the table and you try to put everybody, where is the time period that they should have been born in, if not today?
Wow.
Which is a lot of fun. Like, I would look at, like my fierce feminist, step grandmother, and I would think you should have been a suffragette in a fabulous hat who was chaining herself to the railing of number 10 Downing Street with a Weather banner.
Wow.
Or, I look at my husband and I'm like, you are either too early or too late. I either should be captaining a starship in 2023, or you should have been like a Viking with an axe and like a sunstone sailing to conquer America.
Oh, be still my heart.
But I do this all the time, and sometimes it does result in like an interesting character. I mean, like my husband's grandmother was this fiery Sicilian cook, and I ended up making her the heroine of one of my Renaissance novels because I was like, what would you have been? And like, you'd have been a cook, and you'd have been like a cook for the Borgia family, and that's exactly what I made her into. And she loved it. So
I tell you, my husband, without any question, was born too late. He would have been a wonderful lord with in the 1800s with those gorgeous cravats to tie and the dark hair. He's such a gentleman, and he has such a lovely way of speaking. He was born too late. So I imagine him as my Mr. Darcy.
Oh.
That's a great game. A great game, Kate.
So on your book, in your book, there's a conversation about this as well. You have the family tree and the map.
Oh, I'm so proud of that. Yes, I do.
Oh, absolutely. And I think it's sad for those, because people like to do the audiobooks. They don't get to see this beautiful family tree and map. Can you talk a little bit about, did you do this, or does that come from the publisher? How does that
I have to tell you, I wanted to do this for 20 years. And I always either didn't get it done or, too late. And now, especially Sullivan's Island and Isle of Palms are literally right next to each other, separated by a little inlet. And yet there's a difference in flavor and tone in the two places. And I found on Etsy an artist who I really, really liked. And it turns out she lived like a block, a couple miles away. What a coincidence. And she created this adorable map with Isle of Palms and Sullivan's Island. And she knows it so well because she's local. But she put all the houses so that people now, after 20 years, know where everyone lives and why it's so easy. If you read the Low Country series, the characters are in this book as well. They intermix the two series, and you know where the houses are. And then also the family tree. There's getting to be a lot of people. I'm not quite up to Tolstoy yet. Tolstoy has me beat. You need that. All the people. What do you call that? I'm blanking on that.
Family tree.
Thank you. Yeah. And all the arrows and all that. But this is a simple enough family tree and the same artist. So I'm afraid it's not, if you don't have the audiobook, and I didn't even read the audiobook this time. With COVID, I couldn't travel. Mm-hmm. I also think my voice has changed.
Oh.
Yeah, after I had COVID, I have a low voice anyway, but it seems a little bit more gravelly. And I remember when we had Chris Bojalian on our show, Friends in Fiction, which we should mention a bit. He was, his voice is strained, and he said that he had damaged his vocal cords during COVID. So you never know what some of the long-term effects are.
Absolutely. Well, since you started with Friends in Fiction, you want to talk about that a little bit, and tell them about the gift you're giving out to everyone tonight.
Kate was one, as we said earlier, is one of our favorite guests, and it started during the pandemic. So it's one of the things we found in the pandemic. And it's every Wednesday at 7:00 Eastern. And we have amazing guests. I think this Wednesday is Pam Jenoff with a World War II book.
One of our other favorite authors. We love Pam.
It's the woman with the blue star, right?
Yes.
I just did an event with her this morning.
Oh my God.
Great.
Will you talk? Okay, tell us about the woman with the blue star, because I haven't read it yet.
It's on my list as well. I need to get through another ARC first, but it is essentially it is taken from real life, where Pam talked about the fact that there were a community of Jewish people in Poland who managed to escape persecution and rounding up in the Holocaust by retreating to the sewers and living there. And she said that she took this plot idea from a little girl in the sewers who looked up through the grate into the world outside and saw a girl her own age who was buying flowers with her mother in a market. And her mother and her own mother looked at her and said, don't worry, there will be flowers for you.
Oh, wow. That's a beautiful beginning.
And Pam took that and thought, well, what if the girl in the sewer and the girl on top buying flowers actually get a chance to meet and become friends? And that's what she took as her starting off point. So I'm really looking forward to Friends in Fiction if you have Pam next. She's so wonderful.
Yeah, she's coming on Wednesday night, and we have been so fortunate. We have had amazing authors and almost 70 shows now, and we continue, and we have 40,000 members and growing, over 40. And I think we figured out that there's some 200,000 views of all the episodes over time. So it's
wonderful. It has been such a highlight. I know you said this earlier about it being, a good thing that came out of the pandemic. It's absolutely, so many of our customers and friends have connected and met so many authors, or have found authors and books that they never would have had they not been for Friends of Fiction. So it's been great. And the authors, all of them, are so extremely, just like you two, extremely supportive of the indie bookstores.
It's fun when authors are friends. It's especially nice, isn't it, Kate? That it just makes it, I love her.
So anybody who has not tuned in to Friends in Fiction on Wednesday nights, join us this coming Wednesday, because it's fabulous. It's so much fun. And I know people that watch it every week and meet people. They meet people by chatting, by hearing all these fun things. It's really a great.
And I have to jump in and say, speaking of lost and found, it was found for me, but I think getting out now with people when I do book signings, the most heartfelt comment, and all of us are commenting on it, tears, is when people come up and say, Friends in Fiction saved me during the pandemic. At 7:00, we are there because it's our community, and they see other friends that they've made on.
Yes, absolutely.
And so we all love books. We all love to read, and it's friendly. I think our personalities, don't you think, Kate, that we all just we have different ages and personalities, and yet we bring different viewpoints. So
it's wonderful. It really is.
Judy said that too. So thank you.
It's wonderful. This question is actually for both of you. During the pandemic, how have you been able to write? Has it been more difficult than in non-pandemic times? And what have you read more than you normally do? Most readers are saying, of course, their to-be read pile has gotten bigger or smaller, depending, because they found so many new books, yet they're reading a lot more. What about you two?
Kate, you start, because I think I already dove into that a little bit.
Well, I have read nonstop. I read a lot anyway, and the pandemic did not slow me down. I was reading more feel-good stuff, I have to say. It's kind of like I really this is the time to be, reading the entire backlist of Alyssa Cole for lovely romances that where you know you're in good hands to end up things that will end up well. So that's the kind of I've been needing more of that, and I don't think I'm alone there. As for writing, I mean, I had sort of had 2 pandemic books. I had the Rose Code, which I had finished drafting, but I did all my editing in the lockdown, and that was tough. It felt to me, I felt like I had the attention span of a goldfish. It was hard to focus, and there was a real sense of like, I'm sitting there at my work, and I'm just thinking, it's like the world is almost literally on fire outside my window, and given all of that, I just don't care about deepening my heroine's emotional arc right now. I don't care. But then, I ended up thinking, yeah, but you're going to care a lot when this book comes out. And if you feel like you did not put every bit of effort into making it a good book that you could have, so you better make yourself care. And I did. And I'm proud of what came out of it. But so there was some difficulty focusing, but I managed to get through. And then I ended up in the fall, it was October, November, and I ripped off a new draft of like 100,000 words in 3.5 months flat, which is the next book. And I don't know how, I was about to say, I don't know how I did it. Like, that is really quick for me.
Yeah.
But the thing is, I do know how I did it. That was the lead up to the election. Then it was the election and the aftermath and the riots, and my brain was, lockdown was nowhere near over. And I think my brain was so desperate to escape the present that it dove headfirst into this new book and like pulled it over its head. And basically, it was my muse saying, this world is not very fun right now. I think a trip to the Russian front in World War II with the bullets
would be a relief.
The bullets in the mud and the blood flying. That sounds like a spa day. Let's go there and hang out.
Let's go there. Let's go to the front.
Yeah,
I have to agree.
It's so balmy and relaxing. That's exactly what my muse decided, though. It's like, that sounds like a vacation. Let's go there instead of here.
Well, I have to say, I totally agree. My brain just had the COVID brain for reading. And I think on Friends in Fiction, I think everyone knows how I have become, not only do I read audiobooks, but I really listen to them. I love them. And I'm always recommending great audiobooks. That saved me because for the beginning, especially, I was able to rest my eyes and then just listen. But I was unusually productive because, like Kate, I wanted to get stuff done. So I have 3 books coming out April, May, June this year. So in April, it was just a short story. The only short story I've ever written. So it was an exercise in a learning curve. But it was for Dorothea Benton Frank. It is the memorial called Reunion Beach. And a lot of us got together. A lot of her friends were asked by Carrie Farron, her editor, to write a book set against the title Reunion Beach. And I wrote a story about a mother and child reunion. And it was, for my only short story, I'm not boasting, but I think it's one of the best things I've ever written. You just know when something really, it was so hard. But I wrote that. Of course, Summer of Lost and Found was pulling my hair out. But the joy was writing my middle grade book, The Islanders, which you mentioned earlier.
It's wonderful.
That's the book, Kate, that took me away. With little kids exploring an island, learning to unplug, which is what you're talking about. That was a joy. So I have to say, for being really a tough year, I, like Kate, dove into a lot more writing. And I didn't have a book tour, which took a lot of time and energy away from my plate so I could write more.
That's awesome. If either of you, this is to both of you, if you could have lunch with an author you've never met before, who would it be? Doesn't have to be somebody alive either.
Alice Hoffman.
Oh, very good.
I think so. I've gotten into magical realism, and I've always loved her work. And actually, I'm really excited she's actually going to come on the show. But since I've met already so many wonderful authors from Friends in Fiction that I love, because we get to invite our friends like Kate, come on. So I haven't met Alice, and she's an author that I've wanted to meet for many years. So I would say, and I love the Practical Magic series.
Awesome.
It's just that little bit of, no one does magical realism like she does. How about you, Kate?
Oh, I think if I was gonna, I would love to have like a 4-hour 3 martini lunch with Oscar Wilde.
Oh,
Wow.
oh my God, you're talking dead
Only
people,
3
too.
martinis?
No, you said that it could be somebody who wasn't necessarily alive. And
Right,
I
absolutely.
had the chance to meet so many people.
I want to be
conferences.
at luncheon just to hear the bon mots.
Oh yeah, it's like I just like. So I was thinking, I've had a chance to meet so many of the authors that I've admired, and so many of the ones who who have grown to be dear friends. Thanks to events, thanks to conferences, thanks to tours, and I feel like I've known so many, and I have had a chance to have lunch with so many great authors. But it's like there are some I would have loved to have a chance to meet, who are I'm never going to overlap with because they're long gone now. But I think really. Lunch with Oscar Wilde would be that.
You're
would be
right about the 3 martinis.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because Pam Jenoff, we were talking. She was on. This was right before the close down. She was on her last tour, and we were talking maybe 2 years ago, I guess now. She said that she would love Tracy Chevalier, and so we had her as our guest. In conversation at our book lovers luncheon with the library when Tracy was there, and she was able to interview her. So it's, we can't do it with Oscar though. I'm sorry.
You guys with Oscar Wilde for my next book tour conversation partner. I will be very impressed, and I will know that booksellers, bookstore owners actually are wizards.
Yes, they are. Or seance. You can get a good seance going.
That's right. Well, we're running out of time, but it's been a wonderful evening. Thank you both so much for being here tonight. And don't forget, you can order your book. You'll get your special gift from Mary Alice. And we loved having you both. Can't wait till we can do it in person. Mary Alice is actually able to do a couple in person right now. So we're looking forward to having in persons, hopefully maybe this fall. So thank you both.
Yes, I want to meet you in person.
I'd love to. Thank you both so much. It was a wonderful
Bye,
evening.
everybody.
Goodbye, everybody.
Have a lovely rest of your day.
Thank you.
Bye.